is the heater we've chosen. It is a copy of the S-Bar D4, so much to the point that some of the parts interchange. Rated at 5 kilowatts, but it doesn't actually get there. It's more around 3.8 and 4. We've used one of these before, and a lot of other people have used these successfully, but there are a few things you want to do before you install one. First thing is you want to kind of take it apart first and make sure all the sensors and plugs are all in the correct spots. And a lot of them had an issue with the fan being pressed too far on to begin with, so you got to check that and make sure it spins freely. And then the second thing is you want to test fire this outside of the boat, because there's a lot of oils and stuff left over from manufacturing, and you want that all to burn off outside the boat instead of filling your boat full of like plasticky, oily smelling heat. You can really see how simple these things are. And cap unscrews. Come on the bottom side. It's like an insulating gasket. And the whole thing just kind of pops right in. There's an air inlet, and inside of there, there's a fan that pulls air in, pushes it over the into the combustion chamber, mixes some diesel with it, gets ignited by a glow plug. This end gets hot, exhaust comes out here, and this fan on this end, which is also directly coupled to the fan on the inside, so there's only one motor, blows hot air over the aluminum casting. Then there's a control circuit board. So there's two big issues with these Chinese diesel heaters. The first one is that they come with no directions whatsoever, so a lot of them get installed incorrectly, and that gets blamed on the heater a lot. And then the second one is the controllers are junk. So your options are this rotary knob one, which tells you nothing and holds the temperature within your boat, probably within plus or minus 10 degrees. Not the greatest. And then they have another option for an LCD one, which does a slightly better job, but the screen burns out after like 3 months. So we opted to do, is there a guy in Australia that makes these aftermarket controllers for these heaters. And they offer a lot of different options. They have, you can adjust the fuel mixture, you can set timers to turn on and off, you can tell it to turn on if the temperature in the boat gets too low. You can control it over Bluetooth if you have an Android phone, or you can control it over like a web app if you have an Apple phone. So there's like a Wi-Fi network coming out of this thing, and you attach to it with your phone, and you can turn it on remotely, turn it off remotely. It gives you a lot of options. And look, what we're looking forward to is on a cold morning, pulling out our phone, firing up the heater without ever hopping out of bed. That's what we're looking forward to.
Yes.
Okay, I got this hooked up with the jankiest installation ever. I don't have the correct size ground wire, black wire to extend this. I used 2 wires that were smaller gauge.
And those are all leading down
to the battery, where they are attached using vice grips to the terminals. Mounting this in the boat, we came up with the best spot we think, which is going to be back here in the lazarette rather than mounted somewhere in the cabin. One of the biggest issues that these style heaters have is they coke up full of carbon, and that is mostly due to the exhaust being restricted, and that happens when you put on like a super long exhaust. And they don't recommend an exhaust any longer than like 1 meter or 3.3 feet or whatever that is. bracket allows me to remove these 4 bolts and remove the heater and this plate out without having to remove these studs and disconnecting the exhaust and air intake hoses.
We mounted the heater to the forward bulkhead in the lazarette. Due to the weight of the heater, we through-bolted it.
Here's the heater ready to install. We've got exhaust pipe, drain elbow, the fuel line, and the air intake right here.
Andy installed a cowl vent for the heater in the cockpit. Taking air from outside, heating it, and blowing it into the boat helps to reduce humidity. The outlet is mounted just above our bread box on the port side. To connect it to the heater, we used an insulated aluminum duct that runs just under the deck on the port side cockpit locker. The scariest part of the entire installation was drilling a 2-inch hole in the side of our hull for the exhaust fitting. Next, we connected and clamped the exhaust pipe from the heater onto the fitting, then wrapped it in fiberglass tape to cover the hot exhaust. The drain fitting mounted to the lowest point allows any condensation and any water from splashes to drain out.
So this is how the heater fuel system's tied in. This is our primary filter. It comes from the tank, from the pickup in the tank, through the filter body, down here, and then it tees to go either to the fuel pump, to the T. It has a T here with the shutoff valve, and this either goes to the fuel pump for the heater, which is mounted down here, or it goes around to the fuel pump for the engine and the secondary filter, the 2-micron filter. So all the fuel going into the heater is filtered at 20 microns with the primary filter. And then it comes through here, through the pump, through this nylon line, and then back up. You have to use this nylon line to prevent pulsations in the fuel in the line. This is like an impulse type pump, so it like clicks and squirts a little bit of fuel. If you have a big long rubber hose, it absorbs the pressure spike from the pump, and the fuel actually doesn't even move. It just kind of sits there and swells the hose a little bit. So you got to have this hard nylon pipe.
While the wiring is pretty straightforward, this step was time consuming since Andy had to lengthen almost every wire. The final step was mounting the controller. We decided to mount it onto our electrical panel.
A month since we installed the heater, and we have used it exactly 0 times. Since installing it, it has been in the upper 80s and 90s almost every day. So I'd love to be able to report back that it's working great, but we just don't really know right now. But within the couple of hours that we've test run it, everything seems great and it seems to run fine. If you have any questions, leave them down below. And please join us next week for the Boatyard.